Now?
Okay, why don't you do that?
All right.
Then you get the
A fitting way to begin this Neely family saga is with an ancestral portrait. We see in this first picture myself at the left in the second row, and great-grandmother and great-grandfather. This, of course, it really began on June 15th, 1946, in Coraopolis, Pennsylvania. Here is a picture of the bridal group. You see Mom and Dad and Aunt Betsy and Aunt Mim and Aunt Eleanor and Aunt Lois in the front row. After a week's honeymoon in northern Pennsylvania, we settled into our manse, that barn-like house in Rayland. On March 24th, 1947, Mary Beth arrived and was happily welcomed into the world by her grandparents, uncles, and aunts, and the congregation in Rayland and Dillon Vale. In August, great-grandfather Miller assisted grandfather Welsh in baptizing Mary Beth in the First Presbyterian Church.
In August 49, we went to France, where Deb arrived at the American Hospital in Neuilly-sur-Seine on January 17, 1949.
May 1949, the four of us boarded the Dutch freighter Maaskirk, and it took a month to get to Douala, Cameroon, but we arrived there. Our first home in Cameroon was that plank house that you saw there. Proud Dad showed off 6-month-old Deb as they both became used to being in Africa. We spent 3 months at Fulussi learning Bulu, where Deb and Mary Beth quickly adapted to life. Back at Matet, there were walks under the frangipani trees with nurse girl McQuee. Sometimes Mary Beth got to ride too in the arms of Mfunji, our stewardess. Rennie Ritter, our neighbor, and her friend Andrea Peter taught Deb to walk while Mary Beth looked on. Many hours were spent playing with dolls and the bush rope doll furniture which Aunt Jo and Aunt Ruth had left behind. After a year, the four of us moved into the brick house at Matet. The older missionaries favored the wearing of hats all the time, so the girls went off for a walk well clad. At ages 2 and 4, Mary Beth and Deb had a large family of dolls. Playing with African kids, here the children of Mayong, the head medical man, involved trying to help with the lawn mowing. Our third year at Matet, the Sandylands arrived, so Ruth and James joined the girls in the sandbox often. Cows were a big part of life at Matet. Mary Beth visited the barn, perhaps to see Halloweens, the calf born there during our Halloween party one year. Ngonabulu took good care of the girls, and Funji and Bala, the cook, and Maza, the washman, took care of us all.
Furlough in Princeton, 52-53 was soon over, and we headed back with a stop in New York to see Sue and Naomi. We went back to live at Bibia. Entering the station, the church is the first thing we see, but our house is in the background. And here's a better look at the house. The center of our lives was Dager Theological Seminary. Remember Pastor Mayu's house in the background there. Closer to the house was the McLean Dispensary with its chapel, the wards, and the dispensary building where we all got shots now and then and had finger blood taken. Out the kitchen window below the egg beaters and so on, you can look at the croquet field or the picnic area. Remember the bonfires by the rocks. The last few years at Bibia, Dad cut the grass, followed by the cowbirds. We always had a cat or 2 or 3. I'm not sure which this one's name was. At the governor's house in Lolladorf Hill, you got a good bird's eye view of Lolladorf and the hills beyond. In 1953, Mary Beth started first grade at the little school, Hope School, and from then on, both the little school and the middle school and the big school played a big part in our lives, as well as the Anonabeta dorm, which we don't seem to have a good slide of. Deb became a Hope Schooler in '55, and John joined the dorm crowd in '63. David Edward was born on August 21st, 1953. He came into the world with malaria, only weighing 4 pounds. At 5 months, he enjoyed being with big sister, 5-year-old Deb. Mary Beth, Deb, and David were all together during Mary Beth's vacation after a year at Hope School. Mission meeting was a great time to play with all the kids. This was probably mission meeting 53, outside the mission meeting dining room. Note Paul and Billy Brooke with Deb in the front row. At home, Deb enjoyed playing with African kids. Simone and Pauline and Louise Cheger are there with some of the seminary kids. Then there's Billy Boy and Deb posing together when the Brooks came to visit us. Mary Beth, David, Larry Brooke, and Suni Scheidel admire Kathleen Brooks' monkey. At mission meeting in '54, Rebecca Gelser, Ruth Galloway, Deb, Charlotte Gelser, Robert Galloway, and Miriam Gelser pose outside the house where we all lived. For Christmas in '54, we went to the Ankirs in Fulasee. One evening we enjoyed a picnic on a hilltop, and the girls ate wild pineapples. Each year there was a week-long Bible conference at Hope School. Mary Beth and the rest of the little school participated. Looks as though they were all sailors.
When Aunt Ruth Lowry moved from our house in the center house nearby, David helped her transport boxes. David enjoyed games of Ring Around the Rosie, with Big Maria, and his African friends. Deb holds her namesake, Deborah, one of the twin girls born to Evangelist and Gally Mathieu and his wife Maria. Their son Samuel is also in the picture. We all spent a lot of time at Eilat. This was your church home there. Remember Ibalawa? The Hotel Splendide across from the marketplace. John made his appearance on the scene at Inonga, January 15th, 1956. At home with Maria, his nurse girl, he was the center of attention when his sisters were at school. In July 1956, with Grandma Neely, we flew from Cameroon to Paris and then by train to Amsterdam. Mary Beth and Deb turned into Dutch girls on a tour at Volendam. Aboard the SS Maasdam across the North Atlantic, John enjoyed sea air and rides in the new stroller purchased in Amsterdam. In New Concord, Ohio, at Grandma and Granddad Welch's, he reigned supreme in a high chair. We settled for that furlough, 56-57, at 1011 Spink Street, Worcester, Ohio, when Jean Newhouse Beisel and her son, Ben, stopped for a visit. Ben and John played in the yard. Mary Beth, Deb, and their friend Vaughn Bolton dressed up as majorettes for Halloween. When winter arrived, John saw snow for the first time, but seemed to enjoy it. Mary Beth and Deb found out, too, that sledding was fun. Martha Jean was born in Worcester on June 25th, 1957, much to the excitement of her brother and sisters. We flew back to Africa when she was just 4 weeks old and went right to Eilat. Back at Bibia, John found a playmate, little Maria, the adopted daughter of Maza and Maria. Aunt Marty Temple lived in the apartment in our house for a year or so. John and little Maria enjoyed her cookies and her deux chevaux. All dressed up at Eilat in August 1959, we posed for a picture outside Dietrich's, I think. John's 4th birthday was the occasion for a party. Larry and Leon Lehman, little Maria, Mary Beth, and Deb helped them celebrate. From our early days at Bibia through the times, we vacationed at Creeby. We often went to Baturi across the Lobe River. The falls at the Lobe fall right into the sea here. Batanga. Another vacation spot was Grandma Neely's house at Baturi. In March 1960, the big event was the marriage of Ann Lovell and Dick Rowe in the chapel at Eilat. Dad performed the ceremony.
1960-61 saw us back in the States, living in Lambertville, New Jersey, but frequent visits to Worcester with Grandma and Granddad Welsh. Back in Africa saw our first big separation when Mary Beth left for high school in Alexandria, Egypt. Scenes such as mosques and sailboats on the Nile became familiar to her then, and to Deb when she entered 9th grade at Schutz in 1963. During vacation time in '62, the Road Armels visited us en route to the U.S. from Thailand. The African women, many of whom remembered Aunt Lois, welcomed her with a special dance. That year, Hope School celebrated another wedding, Kathy and Rich Feet. Rich's big school pupils helped usher and keep the guest book. Deb and Lois Grout were there. Part of every vacation from Hope School was helping Dad grade and record seminary students' papers. This is the class of '64 with their wives and children. In '64-66, we lived in Philadelphia, and in April '65 found us all at great-grandfather's 100th birthday. Here he is with his children. Uncle Tom, Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Paul, Aunt Amelia, and Uncle Paul Watkins. And with his grandchildren. You can decide who they all are. And then there were the great-grandchildren. Mom posed with her parents, Grandma and Granddad Welsh, when they visited us in Philly. When Grandma Neely came to visit us, we all posed with her. In 1966, Barb and Jerry Sinclair became house parents at Anonabetta. Track meet was always a big day at Hope School. Here John's being timed by Alec Brooks as he climbs the pole. Lynn Reeves, Larry Lehman, and others look on as John tries the broad jump. Track meet always ended with a lot of ribbons won, which were proudly shown off. Back at Bibia, we had a new sink installed in the kitchen, an incentive for Deb and John to help with the dishes when they were at home. John and Joe Tyson, who's look studious in the Anonabetta living room. Joe's dad was head of the Peace Corps. Back at another track meet, John high jumps while Frank Strange watches. And throws the javelin while a whole bunch of spectators look on. After the track meet, Jamie joins Larry, Leon, and John as they show off their ribbons.
Anonabetta kids participated in the worship at Eilat Chapel by singing. John and Jerry, Lynn Sinclair are here seen in the front row. When John was in a junior high, the Reeves took the kids to Creeby for their retreat. They stopped at Bibia en route. Bill, Lillian, Paul, and Joy Brooke brought Mark and John over to Bibia in their Land Rover. John and Mark Payne hike up the falls at Bichoka. John, Mark, and Larry Lehman at the top of Bichoka. John and Mark shoot baskets at Bibia. At Hope School, this court was used for both basketball, tennis, and volleyball. During Christmas vacation in 1968, we three Neelys traveled north with Marilyn Suddy, Harold and Vivian Bowerman, Fran and Ken Amspoker. This was one of the picnics on that trip. At Waza, when we couldn't get a motel room, we took rest hour on the road and slept that night in the post office. We saw a lot of big anthills. In North Cameroon, the forgeron, blacksmith, does his work over a fire in the middle of a field. The final product was a metal bracelet. In 1969, we once again furloughed in Worcester and made it home in time to see Mary Beth graduate from Worcester. She gets her diploma in this picture. That Christmas, we went to Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Dale's Dixon to celebrate with the Welsh side of the family, here at the table with Ellen Swegan. In our Worcester dining room, 539 East University, Uncle Tom snapped a picture which included Aunt Dorothy Miller and Mary Anna Bodie. Back in Cameroon, it was time for John to head for high school in Kinshasa, Zaire, here at the airport with Mary Martha and Andrew Galloway. John got home for Christmas in 1970. Grandma Neely was with us when we met him in Douala. Summer of 71, we spent in Yaoundé, living in Ted and Dorothy Shank's house while they were on furlough. August 1971, Jerry Lynn and Abby Sinclair and Christian Gelzer joined John on the trip back to Tassok in Kinshasa. John came home at Christmas time, and we went to Creeby to celebrate with Ken, Fran, and Harry Amspoker, who was visiting his folks. John and Ken relaxed in the living room near the Christmas tree. Then we all enjoyed numerous games of nerts.
Many Africans played a big part in our lives. Maria, Mazza, and little Maria were with us many years. Nang Cecile was a friend and helper during our last 2 terms at Bibia. Obella helped layman's in the house, but she, her husband Mani, and their grandchildren were good friends of ours, as they had been of Grandma and Grandfather Neely in their Bibia days. The Chegas, Joseph and Suzanne, and all their family were perhaps our closest friends. Kana, shown here with his wife Andang, worked for Grandma and Granddad Neely as gardener. Here they are with the Bibia matriarch Malingi. And then there was the hospital staff who helped us so many times. Remember Mafo, the one on the walker who used to crawl around the station? The Nsamba Binga in their white dresses, singing and dancing in church and out. No African service ever started without a drum call, especially in the village churches such as this one. Note the goat in the background, another familiar figure on the landscape. Dad preached many times in the pulpit of the Bibia church. Then there were all the trips over Cameroon roads with the delays and hazards of mud during the rainy season and dust during the dry season. Cocoa gardens were familiar sights and served as rest stops many times. John shows off a banana tree on the path back of Bibia. The fruit of which was usually hanging on our back porch. I guess everyone in the family tasted bibabolo at some time or another except me. The smell was enough. African ambulances passed our house each day on the way to the hospital. African girls could be seen playing on any school ground. Here's a group at Bikoka near Bibia. Then there was Creeby, our favorite vacation spot. Two boats in Creeby Harbor is seen from the front porch of either Sans Souci or Beau Séjour. This sunset was much more brilliant than it shows here, but the beauty of an African sunset is a good way to end this saga of our life in Cameroon.